Hello all, and welcome to today's EuroCham webinar on transport and logistics. This marks the second of a planned series of webinars where we hope to tackle the most promising sectors of the Cambodian economy and highlight the opportunities available to investors in each of them. So my name is Tom Hesketh, and I'm the Business Services Manager at the European Chamber of Commerce in Cambodia. And the goal of my department is to assist European companies explore and become established in Cambodia. Today, I'll be joined by Charles Esterhoy, the CEO of WorldBridge Homes and the COO of Kerry WorldBridge Logistics SEZ. Charles is also the chairman of the EuroCham Transport and Logistics Committee. As we'll hear later, the WorldBridge Group is one of the largest logistics companies operating in Cambodia. So today's webinar will follow a three-part structure and last around 45 minutes. First, I'll be providing an introduction to Cambodia today, its economy, and a top-level overview of the logistics sector. As an introduction, this presentation is aimed at people new to Cambodia and new to the sector. Later on, Charles will then go into detail about his own experiences of logistics with the WorldBridge Group and his own thoughts on the opportunities and challenges the sector presents. And then we'll finish with a brief Q&A from the audience. What I would say is that please save the questions to the end. But if you do have one, as it pops up when you're thinking about it, just type it in the chat message and we can address it at the end of the presentation. So, to give an overview of EuroCham, EuroCham was founded in 2011 with the support of the European Union ICI Plus grant. Today, it has around 350 members and 20 employees, making it the largest Western chamber operating in Cambodia, with the only two chambers larger than it in Cambodia at the moment being that of Cambodia itself and the Chinese chamber. EuroCham has four pillars. The first of those is services. This is advisory services to European companies looking to expand into Cambodia. Our advocacy department organizes our members into sectoral committees, seeks to understand the issues each of them are facing, and then seeks to achieve policy responses from the government on the issues that they're facing. Our outreach department aims to promote Cambodia as a trade and investment destination, and then our membership department gives services to the members already operating in Cambodia. For example, the traditional networking events that you may be familiar with. Our work at EuroCham has given us a broad understanding of the Cambodian economy. However, for those listeners unfamiliar with the country, Cambodia is a predominantly Buddhist country in the heart of the Greater Mekong subregion. It has an important access route to the sea. Perhaps Cambodia is best known for its world-famous Angkor Wat complex, but what many don't know is that Cambodia is also one of the fastest-growing economies in the world, has a stable political situation, and a young and increasingly educated population who are keen to drive Cambodia's future growth. As just a few statistics to highlight here, Cambodia has a GDP of around 18 billion at the moment. This has been growing at an average rate of 7% per year for the last 2 decades. Cambodia's economy today is driven largely by tourism, agriculture, construction, and the export of garments, particularly to the European Union. It has a population of 15.7 million, around 2 million of whom live in Phnom Penh, and 50% of whom are under the age of 25. Today, yes, we will share this presentation. Today, one of the largest challenges we have at EuroCham Cambodia is changing the perceptions the outside world has of the country. The country can no longer be characterized purely by agriculture and tourism, and it now represents an increasingly modern country seeking to diversify its manufacturing base and modernize in line with some of its ASEAN peers. For example, on the right, in the last 5 years, there have been malls the type that you would see in Singapore or Thailand pop up in Cambodia, noticeably with the Japanese investment into the Aeon Mall complexes. Some reasons you might want to consider Cambodia as an investment destination would include its business-friendly government. Currently, Cambodia has an open economy, relatively low capital requirements relative to some of its neighbors, investment incentives for sectors that are in line with Cambodia's development aims, notably the Qualified Investment Project scheme, which gives tax incentives for certain projects. It has preferential market access to the European Union. I note that yesterday the EBA launched the European Union launched its decision to review the EBA process. However, for now, it still does enjoy those preferential market accesses. Another reason is that it's a relatively untapped market. There's opportunities in many sectors. And some of the businesses that are happening in Thailand and Vietnam have not yet happened in Cambodia, as we'll hear today in the logistics sector. At the same time, Cambodia has a competitive labor force, one of the reasons behind its success in the garment sector, and long-term macroeconomic stability. For example, it has a stable currency pegged to the dollar, low inflation rates, and consistent GDP growth, as previously mentioned. At the same time, as a place to live, expats living in Cambodia enjoy a high quality of life, and Cambodia's middle class is rapidly growing and will be a driving force for consumption in the next few years. So I hope that's given an overview of Cambodia. I'll now dive into the logistics sector. Strategically placed between Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam with an access route to the sea, a growing population, and an export-oriented economy, Cambodia has shown considerable potential as a logistics hub for the ASEAN region. However, so far, an undeveloped transports and logistics sector has proven a barrier to Cambodia's enhanced regional integration. The logistics sector has so far been characterized by a lack of connectivity to markets and services, high operating, maintenance, and logistics costs, unsafe and sometimes unsuitable infrastructure, and low private sector participation. In the past, this has also included limited government policies supporting the development of the sector. However, as we'll hear in the presentation today, this is changing. One of the major issues suppressing the growth of the logistics sector has been relative to countries, for example, in the other garment exporting countries such as China, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. Cambodia simply hasn't had the trade volumes or the number or the population to, I suppose, justify large-scale infrastructure investments. However, this is now changing. As Cambodia's economy becomes larger and more complex, there are promising signs of improvement, and perhaps most noticeably in the form of large infrastructure upgrades, such as those to Sihanoukville Autonomous Port, which you can see in the bottom left of this slide, and Phnom Penh International Airport on the bottom right. And we'll go into these in a bit more detail next. So these improvements are being largely driven by three fundamental drivers. First of these is the fact that the number of goods passing through Cambodia is increasing. By 2030, Cambodian firms are expected to move 4 times more goods through the country than they do at the moment. Cambodia's trade partners are diversifying. There are 149 countries Cambodia was trading with in 2016. That was 34 more than 2015. And the variety of products passing through Cambodia's borders is also increasing, from 900 in 2005 to 1,422 in 2015. However, although these promising trends, according to the 2018 World Bank Logistics Performance Index, Cambodia lags behind its ASEAN peers such as Thailand, Vietnam, and landlocked Lao PDR in terms of cost to export and in terms of its logistics performance index in general. In the ASEAN region, currently the only country that Cambodia is outperforming is Myanmar. This has contributed to the kingdom having some of the highest costs to export in the region. For example, the lift-on, lift-off fees for a 20-foot container invoiced by the Sihanoukville Autonomous Port is almost 5 times that as that of Vietnam's Kai Mep International Terminal. And then you can see in the graph on this slide that the cost to export from different countries in terms of dollars per container is substantially higher than some of its ASEAN peers. To dive down into the Logistics Performance Index, in particular, Cambodia performs poorly in indicators such as infrastructure, the quality of its infrastructure, logistics competence, that's the competence of the companies and the workers, and also in tracking and tracing. And these are the indicators that Cambodia is performing particularly weakly on. So what does Cambodia's logistics sector look like today? Well, in terms of its infrastructure, at least, well, this is a very high-level overview, so we're giving broad summaries here, but in general, it can be summarized as 3 international airports, 2 international ports, and 2 railway lines in terms of the primary infrastructure. However, in response to some of the issues I discussed previously, Cambodia has got its first logistics master plan currently under review, and that period will cover, and the period of that plan will cover 2018 to 2025. It's currently in draft, but it has ambitious plans in 3 areas again. So the first of those would be the development of its air infrastructure. So there are large-scale projects planned for Siem Reap, an airport expansion there, an airport expansion in Phnom Penh, and also a new airport planned for Koh Kong province. Another particularly important one is the promotion and improvement of economic corridors, particularly through rail links and expressways. And some of those include the Western Corridor linking Cambodia through from Poi Phet to Bangkok, the Central Eastern Corridor from Cambodia to Bavet to Ho Chi Minh, and also, of course, from increasing the links from Phnom Penh to the coast. One example of that would be the Singapore-Kunming rail link from Phnom Penh to Sihanoukville. A final one would be linking central Cambodia from Saigon port to Khai Met. Another important part to discuss here is the port expansion plans. So currently we mentioned that Cambodia has 2 ports. There are ambitious plans to expand those further. For example, you can see that Sihanoukville port currently processes around 460,000 20-foot equivalent units per year through its port, but in 2028, they want to expand this to 1.2 million TEUs, so an almost 3 times expansion, and one that also includes it being able to host vessels with a carrying capacity of up to 60,000 tons. Currently, it's limited by the size of its port. This Sihanoukville expansion is being undertaken by being supported by a $203 million loan from JICA. At the same time, Phnom Penh autonomous port is aimed to increase its capacity from 150,000 TEUs per annum at the moment to 500,000 by 2028. And what we would say is that the opportunities for investors are closely tied to some of these developments, either in the form of advisory services to make them happen smoothly, or in actually implementing them themselves. So, and to give just a brief overview, we will be sharing these slides at the end, and you can see roughly what this plan looks like. However, the aforementioned infrastructure upgrades that I mentioned just form one part of the draft logistics master plan. As you can see from this slide, this plan is not just about infrastructure upgrades. It incorporates government policies, government strategies, feasibility studies, ASEAN-wide initiatives, as well as substantial input from multilaterals such as JICA and COICA. For more information on these on the plans, I would recommend you look into these documents in more detail for a complete understanding of the sector. But I hope what this slide demonstrates is that the National Transport and Logistics Master Plan will be the first plan that comprehensively ties all of these other documents together. And so it's a big move in terms of the development of the sector. To go into that plan in slightly more detail, the draft logistics master plan is focused on 5 key SMART strategies and 25 programs. You can see the acronym for SMART on the left. As well as the infrastructure upgrades, the plan includes objectives to strengthen the legal and institutional framework for the logistics sector in Cambodia, streamlining the customs processes. For example, a notable initiative on this aspect would be the January 2019 potential disbanding of the Ministry of Commerce Import-Export Inspection Wing, CAM Control. And finally, and one that we will hear more about in this presentation from Charles, will be the development of logistics hubs, particularly through special economic zones, which we'll talk about later. So The logistics sector in Cambodia is extremely large. We can't cover all opportunities in a 30 to 45-minute presentation, unfortunately. But what we have done is come up with a series of top-level opportunities that, based on our analysis and our input from our members, we believe could be opportunities for outside investors. The first of those would be seaport logistics. So Europe has some of the world leaders in terms of maritime logistics. Currently, the Japanese government is financing and advising Cambodia's port expansions, but there may be the chance for European companies to also not take advantage, but support Cambodia's plans to develop its port capacities. The second of these would be modern and smart logistics. For example, fleet modernization would be one. Cambodia is imposing higher standards on truck use, limiting its fuel cost and traffic congestion. Limiting the fuel cost and traffic congestion demands that trucks currently place in Cambodia. Other ones would be last mile delivery, e-commerce solutions, and cold chain logistics to support Cambodia moving up the agricultural and manufacturing value chains. These in particular could be supported by startups as well. A third opportunity we considered was air freight. And this is mainly based on the fact that from 2013 to 2017, there were 8 new cargo airlines that set up in Cambodia. Although this creates competition, there's clearly a demand for some form of air freight. One way that European airlines, for example, could take advantage of this would be through offering belly cargoes. So that's freight cargo in the hold of passenger planes as a way of breaking into the market before eventually expanding to pure cargo or passenger services. Finally, the last and perhaps most speculative opportunity we think could be available would be to support the nascent oil and gas sector of Cambodia. So for a long time, Cambodia has been planning to extract oil off its 26 oil blocks. However, KrisEnergy is speculatively planning on extracting its first drop of oil in this year. If that is the case, and if they do so successfully, a new opportunity for the logistics sector could be oil and gas logistics. So the government and the Singaporean company KrisEnergy have already expressed a desire that they're looking for firms with downstream expertise, for example, oil refineries and oil transportation. As said, this is just a very top-level overview. And this is certainly not exhaustive, but just this is roughly what we think some of the opportunities presented by the logistics sector in Cambodia are today, particularly for European investors. Okay, so that brings an end to my section of the presentation. I'll now be passing across to Charles Esterhoy. But what I would want to ask you first, Charles, is based on mostly desk review and interviews with our members, these are the opportunities we've come up with. In your opinion, is there anything you can add up? Well, are these opportunities realistic? Or is there anything you would like to add to these? And I'll pass on the presentation to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. As Tom mentioned, my name is Charles Esterhoy. I'm the CEO of WorldBridge Homes, as well as the COO of the Carrier WorldBridge Special Economic Zone here in Phnom Penh. In terms of, say, your overview as to the opportunities and what's happening here in Cambodia, I think you've presented a very thorough summary of what's going on, albeit quite a high level. Yes, indeed. It is a desk review, as you say, but in terms of realities and boots on the ground, as we would say, I think there's a number of other types of opportunities here in Cambodia, which either are starting to emerge now or will be emerging in the near future, meaning the next year to 3 years. Right? So, for example, you spoke earlier about called seaports and opportunities there. Well, on a high level, yes, most of the seaport development has already been scheduled or under development or committed to through Chinese or Japanese investment. But what you do have is a need to expand Cambodia's, let's say, secondary and tertiary arteries for moving goods throughout the country. So things such as secondary roads, road development, truck facilities, truck facility enhancement, waterway facilities enhancement. These are all good opportunities that may not be, let's say, in the mainstream right now in Cambodia, but give it another year or two, and this is what people will be talking about.
Okay.
I think another aspect which you didn't mention directly, but applies to almost any sector here in Cambodia, and that's dealing with education. Cambodia does not have a large or a long history of, say, industrialization or manufacturing other than agriculture and garment manufacturing. But as the world and global economies move towards more digitalization, e-commerce, say digital economies, that brings along a need for supporting industries, supporting services to move along with it. Now, this is, we'll call it education infrastructure, is something which lacks here in Cambodia. I think only recently, only one university here in Cambodia has actually started to offer degrees or courses in transport and logistics. All right, and that's only happened in the past, I think it's only been 1 year now. But there's a huge opportunity in the education area. I think we also want to paraphrase that or add to that, the environment here in Cambodia, the business environment here in Cambodia, is very eager to learn about those things. There's a huge appetite for new knowledge, transfer of knowledge, and new opportunities.
Okay. So there are more opportunities, particularly in the tertiary and secondary and tertiary levels, than what we've discussed so far, and education will make up a big part of that. I guess to build on that then, just want to get your thoughts on the growth of the Cambodian transport and logistics sector, on what your thoughts of it. And I wonder if it would be possible if you could build in, we've just had one question from Monichida Nem about the One Belt, One Road initiative. So I know we mentioned this previously, but maybe perhaps when you go over your overview, if you could discuss how the One Belt, One Road initiative might fit into Cambodia's logistics plans.
Okay. One Belt, One Road. I think this is a topic that I'm not a full-blown expert on, but I think one of the primary objectives of One Belt, One Road is, say, dealing with connectivity, right? And this is an area which Cambodia has, let's say, a lot of importance in the Greater Mekong sub-region. I think goods, you mentioned earlier, the Southern Economic Corridor and other economic corridors which have been alluded to and developed or planned to be developed. That's been in discussion for a decade now. Right? One Belt, One Road is, let's say, another acronym or another initiative to actually achieve that. However, what is missing in the One Belt, One Road initiative is you're missing an opportunity to utilize Cambodia for what it's natural, for what it has available here in terms of potential. One Belt, One Road is looking at movement of goods through Cambodia into, let's say, through Cambodia for the most part. What really exists here in Cambodia is you have to look at Cambodia's centrality in Southeast Asia or in the Greater Mekong subregion. And if you start to look at Cambodia's location as a hub for distribution, more importantly, if you start to look at Cambodia's potential or use Cambodia as a manufacturing hub, and bringing in raw materials, exporting finished goods through Cambodia, as in the manufacturer here in Cambodia. That's when you begin to realize Cambodia's true potential, right? So it's that centrality, which is something not to be overlooked. I think One Belt, One Road, yes, will be important to Cambodia in terms of developing its infrastructure, but looking at the next step or the next stage, what happens after you have all these roads available to you? Well, you need something to put on the roads. You need a reason to have the roads. So, we often have discussions internally at Cambodian WorldBridge Logistics, which is more important. Is it manufacturing before logistics or logistics before manufacturing? So cart before the horse or horse before the cart. So from my background, my experience in coming to Cambodia is with primarily in manufacturing. Running an SEZ, my job is to bring in foreign manufacturing investment. There are challenges to bringing that investment in, one of which is transport and logistics sector and infrastructure, but there are also a number of other challenges which also need to be addressed and are being addressed by the government.
Okay, I think that gives that transitions nicely onto I suppose misconceptions that investors may have of Cambodia. Then I know you mentioned that a part of your role is to try and bring in European manufacturing interest to Cambodia, but and you've touched on some of the challenges. But I guess just to expand on that a bit more, what are some of the common misconceptions you find with European investors in particular?
Yeah, I wouldn't limit it to European investors. As I said, my role as COO at a special economic zone, what we find Cambodia has a bad public relations department. That's the best way to put it.
We can echo that.
I often get questions from potential investors, does Khmer Rouge still exist? Fortunately, that's their conception of Cambodia. But more from groups, FDI, which is in manufacturing and has a need for transport logistics services. We hear about the high cost of electricity is prohibitive, the presence of non-transparent practices, frequent labor disputes, or customs and import procedures are outdated. There's difficulties in setting up a business and poor infrastructure, and then the environment for manufacturing commerce is prevalent here in Cambodia. But what the real truth is in 2019 is that from 5, 6, 7 years ago, the government of Cambodia recognized that all of these things these concerns that foreign investment has are barriers to economic growth. And from 7 years ago, began to take steps to change that. I think what's important to note here is, I think you noted on it earlier, but it is a very pro-business government here in Cambodia. And what's quite unique about that pro-business government is its openness to engage with the private sector in dialogue, so that what you end up with is a true, or solutions which are evocative of both public sector needs and private sector needs. So what you have today in Cambodia is what I call the not so known truths. All right, this is what the real situation here in Cambodia is. And because it is a pro-business government and things are developing here so quickly, A lot of these things will be changing literally daily. And you mentioned earlier, this has just happened last week, the removal of the cam control function from ports was, say, something that is quite significant and will have a lot of impact, positive impact here in Cambodia. Likewise for a group called CAMSAB at the ports. But just to give a few examples, the conception that the cost of electricity is high here in Cambodia. Well, the reality is I run an SEZ, I'm able to purchase my electricity at 12.6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is actually the same price or in some cases cheaper than it is in Thailand. Now, the only reason that I'm able to do that is because of a thing called the Industrial Development Policy, which was launched in late 2015. We talk about non-transparent practices. Well, the reality is there's now an anti-corruption unit, and any company in the private sector can sign an MOU with that group where if there is the appearance of we'll say unofficial practices or delay being created by unofficial practices, the private sector has a voice, and the government will take action and help to police itself. Likewise, we talked earlier about infrastructure. Well, it's beginning from 2012, 2013, movement to rebuild and modernize Cambodia's roads and railways and airports was started. And today, last year, 2017, 2018, the first stage of that, let's say, redevelopment has completed. And today, albeit the port of Phnom Penh or the port of Sihanoukville is not on the same par as port of Singapore, but the fact is it is a more modern port. Now, looking forward, we will, as you mentioned earlier, continue to see those roads and other major infrastructure continue to expand and modernize.
Okay, so apart from those, the developments in roads, port capacity, airport capacity, what are the other type of trends that you see affecting the sector in terms of development and in terms of government policies over in the time that you've been working in Cambodia?
Other trends. First, I would say anything to do with e-commerce. All right, e-commerce and the impact that it will bring to Cambodia's development will be significant, and there are numerous opportunities which come about from that. Cambodia, and this is also included in the industrial development policy, is the drive to diversify its manufacturing base and enhance its SME potential here. And I think a lot of that development will be driven by e-commerce needs. So this is what's in turn going to drive the development in the transport and logistics sector. So I mentioned earlier, the major infrastructure is, I want to say, being built or has been built, but it's the second level of infrastructure. Okay, some people will use the term last mile delivery. Okay, that's not only the physical roads and waterways to access that last mile, but it's also the technologies which support that. So these are, I would say, new opportunities, and this is where the opportunities are. And let's say first the education is needed, and then the businesses need to come in.
Okay, so moving on to, I suppose, the policy side of trends then.
Okay. In terms of policy, I think overall, the industrial development policy, which was adopted in 2015, rectangular strategy, which is also adopted by the government, these will remain as the key drivers of Cambodia's development. But there's a lot of other supporting policy, which we'll say has been in discussion for a while. But things such as amendments to the investment law, amendments to the SEZ law, completion of an e-commerce law, these things need to happen sooner than later, right? Because I think part of the reason for, say that I'm not going to speak for the government, part of the reason for the delay is there hasn't been purpose. What are we really amending the investment law for? What do we really want to attract? What industries, what sectors do we want? And what will those sectors want? You mentioned oil and gas. Okay, investment law or investment incentives for oil and gas are going to be different from incentives for, say, garment manufacturing. We have to, like I said before, we have to remember that Cambodia doesn't have a history with industrialization other than garment manufacturing. A lot of the current regulations and policies built on agriculture and garment manufacturing base. But as Cambodia modernizes and the world looks to Cambodia for new opportunities, the policy and the regulations need to be able to, let's say, step up to the plate and meet the expectations of what global value chains, what FDI wants and what they're looking for.
Okay. And so before we move on to, I know you mentioned we have to understand what is needed here beforehand, before driving policy. Before we move on to that section, I just want to know, in terms of the policy side, not related to policy in Cambodia, but outside of Cambodia, we were anticipating this question, but there has been, yesterday there was the decision to start the formal review process for EBA. I know we were anticipating this question. In terms of what do you anticipate that having on the impact of the transport and logistics sector in Cambodia? Or will there even be an impact? And just before moving on to that, I would just say that although the review process has started, the investigation, an actual decision on whether EBA is either fully removed, partially removed, or maintained in its current status will not actually be made until 2020. And EuroCham's position on EBA is that it very much regrets the decision made by the European Union, and that we hope that the EBA will remain in place when it comes to that decision time in mid-2020.
Yeah. Okay.
The official
quote. Okay. Very good. EBA, development of Cambodia. The way I'm looking at it, basically, we could say the front windscreen is bigger than the rearview mirror. Move forward. A lot of, we'll say, development policy, development of new regulations has been ongoing for the past 3-4 years. Right? It needs purpose in order to complete in a meaningful manner. Removal of EBA is the catalyst to bring these things to completion. Right? So, as I said, move forward. Removal of the EBA is, I want to say, a good thing for Cambodia.
Interesting. Right. Okay, that may be a controversial point, but on that note, let's move on to the next slide. This is in terms of the transport and logistics sector trends, in terms of business opportunities, and what I would want to highlight, because I know it's an area of interest outside of Cambodia, is in particular the SEZs. So, in terms of the trends in terms of businesses, how do you see special economic zones? And I suppose your own work with SME clusters fitting into the business opportunities, the business trends for the logistics sector.
Okay. As I mentioned at the beginning, I work with FDI on a regular basis. Transport logistics, or lack of a viable transport logistics sector here, or one which meets FDI expectations, is a deterrent to investment coming into Cambodia. But I think we need to look at the availability of a reliable and viable local supply chain. Okay, this is what's going to really attract foreign investment here into Cambodia. Now, SEZs are very good as manufacturing sites, okay, for foreign investment. The SEZ model here is, once again, it's very much a public-private sector partnership. SEZs share special conditions with the government. The government provides what's called a one-stop service center, which means for the foreign manufacturer, it's quick and easy access to customs, to Ministry of Commerce, to Ministry of Labor. Well, no longer Camp Control, I guess, but Camp Control was there before. But it's quick and easy access. Now, you mentioned the QIP, or the Qualified Investment Project. Now, this is not specific to SEZs. It's available for any large investment project anywhere in Cambodia. There are some other variants or special forms of QIP. But I think what's most important, if we look at opportunities for manufacturers here in Cambodia, we have to look at investment in developing a local supply chain and using local SMEs and startup companies and ICT sector as well in order to activate or create a reliable supply chain here in Cambodia.
Okay. Right. Okay, so we're leading up to our Q&A session now that will start at 4:45. So I know we have a few slides more to get through, but what I will say is for any slides we don't cover in the webinar, we will be putting the slides and the recording online, and so you will have access to them. For the sake of this presentation, I'll move forward to our summary SWOT analysis of the sector, and Charles, maybe you can talk through the general strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats facing the sector today, perhaps just summarizing some of the things you've told us. And then if anybody has questions, I would ask them just type them in the chat box, and we'll address them as soon as the SWOT summary has been done. And Charles, I'd ask, if possible, for the SWOT to be brief, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about the SME cluster development because we see this as a vehicle moving forward, which answers all the questions for Cambodia's next stages of development and growth. So quickly, SWOT analysis. I think if we're looking at strengths, from an investor standpoint, you have to look at Cambodia's central geographic location and its potential use as a distribution hub and the potential for value-added, using or adding value-added services plus manufacturing before distribution. Don't use Cambodia as a pass-through, use that as a manufacturing base. This opens up a whole raft of opportunities in terms of new business models regionally. I think that's, if we go on to opportunities, I'd say right now for investors or companies from the EU, anything dealing with technology and education of technology or integration of technology into any of the above sectors, that's your biggest opportunity right now. In the very near future, European SMEs, European manufacturing, the environment for those European SMEs and manufacturing, the environment here in Cambodia will be much more developed and will be a lot of new opportunities for, say, diversified manufacturing here in Cambodia. So I think Cambodia will retain its, we'll say, relative low cost structure or comparatively low cost structure in comparison to Vietnam and Thailand.
Okay.
Right. So weaknesses, what you're right now, I would say it's hard to define any one weakness other than the skills gap, right? And that's being bridged very quickly, right? It's that public-private sector relationship which is most important. If you're going to build a bridge a gap, you've got to build the bridge from both ends. Right? Okay. And well, lastly, threats. Well, it's a developing market. Okay, I don't really see that as a threat, but well, I don't see many threats, to be quite honest.
That's an optimistic note to end this on. Okay, actually, we have had just one more question from Manchester Nem, and actually, this gives an opportunity for you to bring in your SME clusters, and so we can go back to that actually. Manchester Nem asks, will Industry 4.0 play a major role for the future of Cambodian development? And is Cambodia ready for Industry 4.0? And I think that actually leads quite nicely to the SME cluster slide and your work with that, because I know that this is a favorite topic of yours in Cambodia.
Yeah. Okay. Industry 4.0. Yes. This is the future of Cambodia. I've mentioned many times in presentations that Cambodia needs to leapfrog from its current state of Industry 2.0, which is reliance on manual labor and electricity. But we need to leapfrog 3.0 and go straight to Industry 4.0. Is Cambodia ready for it? Well, yes and no. In terms of what's needed to make Industry 4.0 and a true German Industry 4.0 happen, Cambodia has these assets now. Those assets are pro-business government and a very young and eager demographic. That's the key ingredients to making an Industry 4.0 work. The thing which is needed next is the opportunity. Okay, and this is where I want to say opportunities from Europe, Japan, Korea, wherever. Once those opportunities come in or are made available, Cambodia will be able to respond. As I was mentioning earlier about our SME cluster, basically, rather than foreign investment taking on the burden of developing what they need in terms of infrastructure, talent, services, resources to make manufacturing work, what we're doing with our SME cluster project is preparing that environment ahead of time. As we've been talking throughout the course of this webinar, a lot of policy regulations have been in the works for many years, right? These are the seeds to what an Industry 4.0 environment needs. All we're doing with our cluster is giving those seeds a place to grow and blossom, right? So the natural assets are here, the environment's here, the ability to leap to an Industry 4.0 is very much a possibility. I've been saying this for 2 years now. And 2 years ago, people said I was crazy, but 2 years later, Industry 4.0 is the big subject of discussion nowadays. And that's why we've developed the SME Cluster Project. We see it as the vehicle of Cambodia's growth moving forward.
Okay, and so there has been demand from both Cambodian and international firms to be involved in this cluster. Because one of the questions I always have when I see these is this just a push of the sensible thing that should be done, or is there actual demand for this? And I think your question, your response answers that there. So you are seeing active involvement from both Cambodian and non-Cambodian partners to get involved in these SME clusters and to really promote Industry 4.0 in Cambodia.
Yeah, last October we held a SME development workshop that we put together. Want to do the next one with EuroCham, but since then I've been approached by local SMEs, I've been approached by FDI, and I've been approached by other organizations, all in support of SME cluster development. We have been working very closely with a German partner to bring in and help us realize the aspects of Industry 4.0. They're very, very supportive, as is the German business community here in Cambodia itself. So yes, there is a lot of interest in it. I think we'll just need to be careful that using the term SME cluster is going to become a generic term. What we're doing and what Cambodia really needs is an SME cluster based on an Industry 4.0 operating environment.
Okay.
That's the difference. You have to bring the technology in, and that's where Cambodia's strength is. It's in using technology.
Okay, okay. So I think we have just 2 more minutes left on this. My final question would be, you mentioned that the skills gap is filling up very quickly in Cambodia, but at the same time mentioned that there's only one course currently offering training on logistics. Do you see this as something that, do you know of initiatives that are aiming to fill this gap at the moment? And are the skills that are needed for logistics being filled at the moment?
I don't know of any courses right offhand. I think the best summary or the best statement to make here, and this is also partly what's driven the development of the SME cluster. Without a purpose, you can't reverse engineer what you really need. So if we're doing transport logistics utilizing technology, and new forms of integration of technology into the transport logistics sector, then you're going to have those courses appearing. Okay, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So what our approach is very much about defining the final end game and then reverse engineering, right? The support, the network, the organizations, the let's say assets to envision or to realize whatever you reverse engineer those needs are. It will happen here. It can happen here.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But first, you have to have that end game defined.
Okay. So, and I think that's a good summary to end on. I hope that those who've joined this webinar today have enjoyed what they've heard. As I said before, we will be sharing the presentation deck, and the actual recording of the webinar will be posted on the EuroCham YouTube page as well. I'd like to thank Charles for joining us today. I'd like to thank the team for supporting us with the logistics of this webinar, and I'd like to thank you all for joining. So thank you very much. If you have any other questions, please contact us through the EuroCham webpage. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.